Lady, I can't believe you didn't get it already. Aren't you following my cues? I mean, I started out, in one affect, understanding how things were going. Didn't you notice that I was coming in wearing what you were wearing, but then, giving it a little bit of attitude? They have criminal liability insurance. What is that? Well, my understanding is that if there's a crime that's committed involving you or your organization, regardless of where you are, you can get insurance for the losses. So, what do you think happens if, after giving people a bunch of distress, coded in an executive order that literally flipped people's lives? You remember, you found that. He took the executive order and he used to say about urban projects growing the economy, growing the people, and then they turned it into distress. They literally inverted it. You found it, you were pissed. And now, after all of this time, right as they're paying out these big time dividends on that remaining Texas gas and oil sector industry, headquartered right here in Dallas, they want to talk about a big Texas job fair with 1 day to prep in 2 days, virtual. Yeah, they're setting people up. They're setting people up. It's entrapment. They're being lured into coming up with fake qualifications, padding their resume here and there. They gave you the cue. Are you going to accept it? Are you going to go along and let them recalibrate? You know how the insentients are saying, don't worry, we support you. You had a hard time. We did a reassessment. Yeah, we added some extra things on your resume. It wasn't there before. We gave you a little bit of an extra duration. These are actually your skills. Go ahead, apply. You'll get a job. Then you've got these other people. They're in big problems. They got big trouble. They're broke. They're crooks. They gave kickbacks to crooks. They took kickbacks from crooks. They got bribes. They bribed. And you know what? They've got all this insurance. Now, what's the insurances they got? They've got insurance in fucking sexual harassment because nobody wants to deal with the actual cybersecurity. So then they got cyber insurance and they got criminal liability insurance because, especially if you impersonate a federal employee or if you impersonate a law enforcement officer, those are felonies. Those are crimes. So if you get a bunch of people applying and you interview them and you go through the whole process and then they defraud you by misrepresenting themselves or impersonating someone they're not, that's crime. And if they got that criminal liability insurance, which by now they got, and they probably got plenty of underwriting to support the policies because there was all these other criminals that should have gotten busted that didn't get busted. And the means by which they were able to keep themselves from getting busted is insurance. And what better way to keep your fucking ass in office, propped up in your nice little diplomatic or governmental or sovereign immunity position, than to go ahead and pass the tricks of the trade on to all those guys that supported your campaign. It might be having some difficulties right now. And they got on the PPP. They got the fucking protection for a while. They were able to get some things covered with some other kinds of insurance from the federal government while they hooked up and institutionalized all that other kinds of insurance. And by now they got federal assistance to pay for that insurance. Now's the time to collect. And what better way to do that than to collect from a bunch of poor schmucks looking for a job, going in, agreeing to pad their resume here and there. And the thing is, this insurance might get claimed on them. And they might get a lien put on them. They might get a penalty put on them. But nobody said anything when you're on the train and they're dinging your junk, right? Well, they got the camera working and you're on your cell phone or somebody next to you is on the cell phone. Nobody said anything about that. Nobody said anything about what it meant to be in the library and then be online and then have them give you a little bit of extra time or maybe give you access to something you shouldn't have had access to ordinarily, like people's private information. Nobody said anything about that. They've been enticing people, making a greater and greater buy-in because these guys who are actually the crooks need to cover their ass by setting up a bunch of people on a little bit on another level. This is the way it's been going. Overseas, you got people busting prime ministers, right? Busting members of parliament, busting judges. They even got judges getting busted other places, man. You know that? big heads of banking institutions. Whatever happened with Gonzalez, man? The original Gonzalez. You know who I'm talking about. Not the Attorney General, the other Gonzalez, the guy from San Antonio. You know, the guy that wrote that bill after all these guys in Texas got busted. Isn't that funny? All these guys in Texas get busted during the SNL crisis. What happens? Well, the guy from Texas ends up writing this bill. And then you read through the bill. It sounds like some good stuff in there. Don't get me wrong. Sounds like he put some good stuff in there. It's the kind of stuff you need, right? But who actually does that stuff? Oh, okay. A couple years later, there's a report. Remember that report you were talking about? You tried to get a copy of that report, but they wanted you to agree to something else when it came to the distribution of that report. So you didn't end up getting the actual copy of the report in the mail. You got other things instead, right? But in the meantime, there's that report, right? And what's going on with that report? What does it say? The introduction to the report, the person presenting the report who did the investigation. He says, when we originally described how we were going to investigate acts of money laundering involving the financial sector and the banking sector, we were going to focus on domestic operations, but at your request, we focused instead on foreign banking operations. And ever since then, when was the last time you actually got an authentic audit on a bank in this country? When was the last time one of these guys that commit financial fraud actually got busted with criminal charges? It doesn't happen because they got insurance. They leverage the insurance that's created when other countries are pressured in to make it bust. And then they give insurance to these crooks here so that then they can trickle down and they can bust people. That's why you get these little petty ass busts here and there. That's why you got a bloated prison industrial complex and you don't get the actual fucking security you need by actually busting the damn criminals to keep the racket going. Now, unfortunately, because they're so damn friggin' corrupt and they've been so comprehensive in this transformation, you know? Transitioning the command authority over the military to the nice yen derivatives economy, where you don't have the same standards, where you don't have the same assertiveness, where you don't have the same upfront possibility for charging somebody for murdering a motherfucker without any just cause. You hide it behind treatment. You extract their genetic materials. You give it to all these other guys as kickbacks. And then when it comes right down to it, you bust the end user. You bust the consumer. That's what happened, you know, task force on, what was it? Fraud enforcement. What was fraud enforcement? Condition people on how to commit fraud and get away with it. Then create market integrity so they're stuck in a rut. They have to keep performing consistently in that fraudulent scheme because if they try to change their positioning without making their kickbacks, then they're consuming fraudulently. And that's what they're doing right now. Trying to bust consumer fraud so that these guys can get their fucking payoffs in the form of criminal liability insurance. Oh my gosh, we've been exposed to such significant liability because all these people were lying about their credentials when they came to this job fair that we put together in good faith. Oh my goodness. Now the question is, are those people ever going to be told? Is anybody going to tell them what the charges are? Or is somebody going to say this is part of a counterintelligence effort to recapture what ended up getting illegally distributed because of that intelligence investigation, right? All that intelligence on Russian hacking. Let me ask you, how many people this job fair today are actually Russian? How many are actually Chinese? How many are even from Texas or ended up getting brought down to Texas and kidnapped and kept in Texas until they're so desperate they're willing to take somebody else's identity to get a job for below minimum wage? I'm telling you guys, don't do it. Don't do it. It's crime. You're the criminal now. Just trying to get a job makes you the criminal, and they're not going to give you the insurance. They're going to make you the government and then tell you gotta pay.